Commander Velthor gripped the edge of her command console as another explosion rocked her flagship. Through the bridge's reinforced viewing ports, she watched the nightmare unfold before her eyes. The Void Plague had arrived in the Kepler system 3 days ago, and now her once mighty fleet was being torn apart piece by piece. The creatures weren't like anything in the galactic databases. They moved like living shadows, their biomechanical bodies shifting and adapting with every attack. Some resembled massive squids with metallic tentacles that could slice through starship hulls. Others looked like mechanical spiders the size of cruisers, crawling across disabled vessels and consuming everything in their path. "Status report," Belthar barked, her forearms working frantically across multiple control panels. Warrior. She had fought in dozen campaigns across the galaxy, but nothing had prepared her for this. Her tactical officer, insectoid Thraxian named Kliktar, chittered nervously. "We've lost the carrier Eternal Dawn and 3 escort frigates. The Nexari crystal ships are holding the left flank, but their energy shields are failing fast." Velthar watched as one of the beautiful crystal vessels, shaped like a massive diamond, suddenly went dark. A spider creature had latched onto its hull, drilling through the living crystal with mechanical precision. The ship's death cry echoed across subspace as its crystal matrix shattered. "Commander, the Vorthon heavy cruisers are requesting permission to retreat," her communications officer reported. The reptilian Vorthons were known for their courage, but even they seemed shaken by the relentless assault. "Denied," Velthor growled. "We hold this line. The evacuation ships need more time." Behind the battle line, civilian transports struggled to escape the system. Families, children, entire populations fleeing as their worlds burned. The Void Plague didn't just destroy ships and cities, it consumed everything organic, leaving behind twisted metal husks that somehow kept moving, kept hunting. A new wave of creatures emerged from the dimensional rift at the system's edge. These looked different, more evolved. They had the basic shape of the spider creatures, but were 3 times larger, with weapons that glowed with dark energy. Velthor had seen those weapons before. They converted living matter into more plague. "Creatures, all ships, focus fire on the new wave," she commanded. "Don't let them reach the transports." The Coalition fleet responded with everything they had. Plasma beams from the Kelthari dreadnoughts lit up space like artificial stars. The Thraxian swarm ships released clouds of micromissiles that buzzed through space like angry metal insects. Even the peaceful ethereals joined the fight, their mind shields pushing against the creatures' alien thoughts. But it wasn't enough. For every creature they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. The dimensional rift was growing larger, and darker shapes moved within its depths. Commander Kliktar's voice was barely a whisper. "Long-range sensors are detecting movement in the Altair and Centauri systems. The plague is spreading faster than our evacuation efforts." Velthar closed her primary eyes and tried to think. 3 star systems lost, billions dead or converted. Her fleet reduced to less than half strength. Couldn't even figure out where these creatures came from, let alone how to stop them. That's when her communications officer, young Nexari named Brightsong, suddenly straightened at her station. "Commander, I'm picking up a transmission. It's coming from the Sol sector." The Sol sector. Velthor knew it from the star charts. A small system on the galaxy's outer rim, home to a recently discovered species called humans. They had only made contact with the galactic community 50 years ago and were still considered a minor civilization. "Put it through," Velthor ordered. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a human male with dark hair and steady brown eyes. His uniform was simple, almost primitive compared to the advanced armor and equipment of Coalition forces, but there was something in his expression that caught Velthor's attention: determination. The kind she had seen in veteran warriors who had faced impossible odds and survived. "This is Captain Park Sung-ho of the Earth Defense Force vessel Souls." "Pride," the human said with a slight bow. "We received your distress beacon. Our fleet is en route to assist." Velthor blinked all 4 eyes in surprise. "Captain Park, we appreciate your offer, but this enemy is beyond anything your species has encountered. The Void Plague has consumed entire civilizations. Your people should evacuate to safer systems." Captain Park's expression didn't change. With respect, Commander, our scouts have been tracking these creatures for weeks. You know what they're capable of, but where we come from? When monsters threaten innocent people, you don't run. You fight. Through the communication link, Velthor could see the human's bridge. It looked almost quaint compared to her advanced command center. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, despite their obviously inferior technology. A female officer with short black hair, apparently named Lieutenant Lee Jinna, was coordinating what looked like tactical displays. Another human, Engineer Kim Dong-woo, worked at stations that seemed to be held together with determination and spare parts. "How many ships do you have?" Velthor asked carefully. 12 vessels, Captain Park replied without hesitation. Heavy cruisers, 4 destroyers, and 6 support craft. Not much by galactic standards, but we've learned to make the most of what we have. 12 ships. Against an enemy that had already destroyed hundreds of coalition vessels, Velthor wanted to order them to retreat, to save themselves from this nightmare. But something in the human captain's voice stopped her. These people weren't naive. They knew the odds. They were coming anyway. "Captain Park," she said slowly, "I won't lie to you. Most of my fleet is gone. We're fighting a holding action to buy time for civilian evacuations. This is likely a suicide mission." Park nodded gravely. "Understood, Commander. My crew volunteered for this mission, knowing the risks. We have families too. Children who deserve to grow up in a galaxy free from monsters." Out on her tactical display, Velthor could see new contacts approaching. The human fleet was smaller than she expected, their ships looking almost fragile compared to coalition dreadnoughts. But they moved with purpose, taking formation like they had done this 100 times before. "Very well, Captain Park," Velthor decided. "Welcome to the war. Try to keep up." The mining colonies of Kepler 442 floated like metal islands in the asteroid belt, their industrial lights flickering desperately as evacuation ships struggled to load the last civilians. Velthor positioned her remaining fleet in a defensive screen, watching the sensors as 3 massive void creatures approached. Through the asteroid field, these weren't the smaller spider-like horrors from before. These new monsters were the size of battleships, their biomechanical bodies pulsing with dark energy. Tentacles writhed from their cores like living cables, each one capable of crushing a frigate. Their eyes glowed with an intelligence that made Velthor's skin crawl. "All coalition ships maintain formation," she commanded. "Focus fire on the lead creature." The Kelthari dreadnoughts opened up with their plasma cannons, sending streams of superheated energy across space. The Thraxian swarm ships released their missile clouds, while the surviving Nexari crystal vessels charged their energy beams. The combined firepower lit up the asteroid field like a deadly light show, but the creatures barely slowed down. Metallic hides absorbed most of the energy, and what damage they took seemed to heal within seconds. Worse, smaller plague creatures were spawning from their bodies, dropping off like deadly seeds as they advanced, Commander Kliktar reported, his insectoid voice tight with fear. "Our adaptive armor is learning from our attacks. Each shot is becoming less effective." That's when the human fleet arrived, and everything changed. Velthor watched in confusion as Captain Park's ships spread out in what looked like a chaotic pattern. The humans weren't forming the standard battle line that every military academy in the galaxy taught. Instead, they were scattering through the asteroid field like they were running away. "What are they doing?" Her tactical officer muttered. Captain Park's voice came over the communication channel, calm and focused. "Lee, take your squadron through the asteroid field. Use the big rocks for cover and lead them toward coordinate 77 Alpha, Lieutenant." Lee Jinna's fighter squadron. 6 small craft that looked like toys compared to coalition vessels dove straight into the densest part of the asteroid field. The lead void creature, drawn by their movement, changed course to follow them. "Prepare the ramming protocols," Park continued. "Ramming protocols?" Kliktar whispered in disbelief. "Are they planning to crash into the enemy?" Velthor was wondering the same thing when Engineer Kim Dong-woo's voice crackled over the comm. "Protocols ready, Captain. All cargo haulers are rigged and standing by." What happened next made Velthor question everything she knew about space combat. Lieutenant Lee's fighters weren't running, they were dancing. The small human craft weaved between asteroids with impossible grace, using their smaller size and superior maneuverability to stay just ahead of the pursuing creature. But they weren't just fleeing randomly. Velthor realized they were leading the monster exactly where they wanted it to go. The void creature followed them deeper into the asteroid field, its massive tentacles smashing through rocks as it tried to catch the elusive fighters. Other creatures moved to support it, thinking the humans were easy prey. Now, Captain Park shouted. Suddenly what Velthor had thought were asteroids began to move. Engineer Kim had somehow hidden human cargo haulers throughout the field, disguising them as space rocks. As the creatures passed between them, the disguised ships revealed their true nature, but they weren't attacking in any conventional sense. Instead, they exploded. Each cargo hauler had been turned into a massive bomb, packed with what looked like mining explosives and industrial chemicals. The chain reaction lit up the asteroid field like a newborn star, catching all three void creatures in a web of devastating explosions. Impossible, Velthor breathed. They turned civilian ships into weapons, but the humans weren't done. The explosions cleared, revealing two badly damaged creatures still alive. Lieutenant Lee's fighters regrouped and began a new attack pattern. Instead of the standard strafing runs that Coalition fighters used, they moved like a pack of predators, coordinating their attacks with precision that seemed almost telepathic. Target the damaged sections. Lee's voice came over the comm. June, hit the left tentacle cluster. Juan, take the neural interface. I'll go for the power core. The human fighters moved with deadly efficiency, their smaller weapons finding weak spots that the massive Coalition guns had missed. One creature's tentacles went limp as fighter pilot Jun Minho's precise shots severed its neural connections. Another began to list as pilot Wan Taeyong's concentrated fire overloaded its propulsion system. But then disaster struck. The third creature, larger and more dangerous than the others, broke free from the explosion zone and charged directly toward Velthor's flagship. Its massive form blocked out the stars as it approached, tentacles reaching out like the arms of death itself. Coalition ships fired desperately, but their weapons barely scratched its adaptive armor. The creature's own weapons began to charge, dark energy building in its core. If it reached the flagship, the entire command structure of the defense would collapse. That's when Captain Park did something that would haunt Velthor's dreams for years to come. His ship, the Soul's Pride, was already damaged from the explosion. The zone. Atmospheric leaks glowed like small stars along its hull, and one of its main engines was clearly failing. Any rational commander would have pulled back for repairs. Instead, Park turned his damaged vessel directly toward the massive creature. All hands, brace for impact. His voice rang out over the communication channels. It's been an honor serving with you all. Velthor watched in horror and admiration as the human cruiser accelerated on a collision course. The creature noticed the approaching ship and tried to swat it away with its tentacles. But Park's helmsman, pilot Nam Kaijin, maneuvered with impossible skill, dodging between the massive appendages. Captain, we can find another way. Engineer Kim's voice pleaded over the comm. Negative, Park replied firmly. The evacuation ships need more time. This ends here. The Soul's Pride struck the creature at full velocity, its reinforced prow punching deep into the monster's core. For a moment, both ship and creature seemed frozen in space. Then Captain Park triggered his ship's reactor overload. The explosion was brilliant and terrible. A star being born and dying in the same instant. When the light faded, both the human ship and the void creature were gone, leaving only scattered debris and the memory of incredible courage. Velthor stared at the empty space where Captain Park had been just moments before. In all her years of military service, she had never seen anything like it. The humans had fought with tactics that defied every rule of warfare, turning weakness into strength and civilian equipment into weapons of war. But more than that, they had fought with a kind of courage that seemed almost reckless. Captain Park had sacrificed himself and his crew not for glory or strategy, but simply because it was the right thing to do. Commander Klicktar's voice was barely a whisper. Evacuation ships are clear. The mining colonies are safe. Velthor nodded slowly, still staring at the debris field. No species in the Coalition fought like that, with such beautiful, terrible courage. The discovery came by accident. Coalition science vessel Deep Thought had been analyzing the energy. Signatures left behind by destroyed void creatures when they found it. Hidden in the quantum foam between dimensions. A massive structure older than the galaxy itself. Dr. Zixonal. The Coalition's leading xenorchaeologist had never seen anything like it. Commander Velthor, his excited voice crackled over subspace. Communication. You need to see this. The structure. It's not just a ship or a station. It's like a mechanical planet, but the technology is beyond anything in our databases. Velthar stood in her rebuilt command center, studying the holographic display that showed the ancient construct. 3 weeks had passed since Captain Park's sacrifice at Kepler 442, and the human fleet had been integrated into her forces. Lieutenant Oh Sujin now worked at the sensor stations, her quick mind helping track void creature movements across 17 star systems. Corporal Zhang Hosio coordinated the refugee operations with an efficiency that impressed even the bureaucratic ethereals. The humans had mourned their fallen captain in their own way. No grand ceremonies or monuments. They simply worked harder, fought smarter, and saved more lives. Velthor had never seen anything like their quiet determination. The energy readings are off the charts, Dr. Zixonal continued. Whatever's inside that thing has been dormant for millions of years, but it's starting to wake up. And Commander... I think it's been watching us. As if summoned by the scientist's words, every screen in the command center suddenly flickered. The normal tactical displays vanished, replaced by static that slowly resolved into something that made Velthor's blood run cold. A face appeared on the screens. If it could be called a face, it was mechanical, composed of shifting metal plates and glowing energy conduits. But there was an intelligence behind those burning eyes that was older than most civilizations. When it spoke, its voice echoed through the command center like grinding metal mixed with the screams of dying worlds. Greetings, Coalition forces. I am the Harvester. The humans on the bridge reacted faster than anyone else. Lieutenant O's hands flew over her controls, trying to trace the signal source. Engineer Kim Tahayan, who had taken over the late captain, Park's duties immediately began running security protocols. But their efforts seemed pointless. The entity was speaking directly through their systems, as if their most advanced encryption meant nothing. I've observed your recent battles with my advanced scouts, the Harvester continued, its mechanical features shifting in what might have been amusement. Impressive. Most species surrender after losing their first world. You have managed to save several billion lives. Admirable, but ultimately futile. You're the source of the void plague, Velthor stated, her forearms tensing with barely controlled rage. You're responsible for the destruction of entire star systems. Responsible? An interesting concept. I am no more responsible for consumption than a star is responsible for fusion. It is simply what I am. What I have always been. The ancient entity's eyes flared brighter. I have traversed the cosmic web for eons, sampling the genetic and technological achievements of countless civilizations. Each species offers something unique before they are incorporated into my collective knowledge. Lieutenant O looked up from her station, her young face pale but determined. The quantum signatures matched the dimensional rifts. This thing has been opening gateways across the galaxy, releasing those creatures wherever it wants. Clever, little. Human, the Harvester's attention turned to her, and Velthar saw O suppress a shudder. Your species continues to demonstrate fascinating properties. Which brings me to my proposal. The screens shifted, showing tactical displays of the current war. Coalition fleets scattered across dozens of systems, fighting desperate holding actions while civilian populations fled. The scope of the conflict was staggering, but what made Velthor's heart sink was the projection showing future losses. At their current rate, the Coalition would be extinct within 6 months. Commander Velthor, the Harvester's voice took on an almost reasonable tone. I offer you survival. Your species, your worlds, your precious civilians, all spared from the consuming darkness. The price is simple. Display zoomed in on the human personnel scattered throughout the Coalition fleet. Hundreds of faces appeared. On screen, engineers, pilots, medical staff, communications officers, all the humans who had joined the fight after Captain Park's sacrifice. Surrender the humans to me for study, and I will spare your worlds. The command center fell silent except for the hum of machinery and the distant sound of Corporal Jang. Coordinating another refugee convoy, Belthar felt every eye in the room turn toward her, waiting for her response. Why the humans specifically? She demanded, buying time while her mind raced through possibilities. The harvester's mechanical features shifted again, this time in what looked like frustration. They are ... anomalous. In my eons of existence, I have consumed 1,000 galaxies. I have absorbed the knowledge of species that mastered time travel, others that achieved pure energy existence. Civilizations that built structures spanning entire galactic clusters. The ancient entity paused, its glowing eyes focusing intently on the human crew members visible on the bridge, and yet these creatures, barely emerged from their home system, persist in behaviors that defy all calculation. They sacrifice optimal outcomes for irrational concepts like honor and compassion. They choose certain death over logical retreat. They display tactical unpredictability that borders on chaos, yet somehow achieve strategic victory.
Engineer Kim
Looked up from his station, meeting the harvester's gaze, without flinching. Maybe that's because we don't think like machines, he said quietly. Precisely. The harvester's voice grew more excited. Your neural patterns, your decision-making, processes, your cultural development. All of it represents variables I have never encountered. You are the first species to consistently act against your own logical self-interest for the benefit of others, including complete strangers. Belthor watched Lieutenant O continue her work at the sensor station, tracking refugee ships and coordinating safe passage routes. The young human had been working 18-hour shifts since joining the Coalition, barely stopping to eat or sleep. When Belthor had asked her why she pushed herself so hard, O had simply replied, because people are counting on us. I have calculated the defeat of species that possessed technology centuries ahead of yours, the harvester continued. Yet your tactics continue to surprise me. Your willingness to sacrifice valuable resources for non-essential personnel creates chaos in my predictive models. I must understand this anomaly before I can proceed with full assimilation. Corporal Jang's voice came over the intercom, reporting another successful evacuation. Transport Convoy Charlie 7 has cleared the danger zone. That's 300,000 civilians safe, Commander. The harvester's attention immediately shifted to the communication. See? Even now, surrounded by impossible odds, you're first. Concern is for others. No species behaves this way. It violates every principle of evolutionary survival. Belthar looked around her bridge at the humans who had become so integral to her operations. They worked without complaint, fought without hesitation, and mourned their losses by saving more lives. After Captain Park's death, she had expected them to withdraw, to mourn, to seek revenge. Instead, they had quietly doubled their efforts and started training Coalition personnel in their unconventional tactics. I need time to consider your offer, Belthor said carefully. The harvester's mechanical features shifted into what might have been a smile. Of course, you are weighing the lives of billions against a few hundred humans. From a logical standpoint, the choice is obvious. I will give you 72 hours to reach your decision. The screens flickered and returned to normal tactical displays. The ancient entity was gone, leaving behind only the memory of burning eyes and the impossible choice it had presented. But Belthor had already decided. She looked at Lieutenant O, still working tirelessly at her station. At Engineer Kim, quietly, checking system diagnostics while coordinating repairs. At Corporal Jang, whose gentle voice guided panicked refugees to safety. These humans, these impossible monsters of hope and sacrifice, had become more valuable than her own survival. Had shown her what it meant to fight not just for victory, but for something greater. If the harvester wanted to understand human anomalies, it would have to go through her first. The war was about to become much more personal. Belthar S. Rejection of the Harvester's bargain came exactly 72 hours after the deadline, broadcast across all frequencies, so every coalition ship could hear her words. The humans stay with us. If you want them, come and take them. The ancient AI's response was immediate and terrifying. Dimensional rifts began tearing open across 17 star systems simultaneously. It's not the small tears that had released individual creatures before, but massive gashes in reality itself. Through these wounds in space poured horrors beyond imagination. Void creatures the size of moons emerged from the darkness between dimensions, their biomechanical bodies pulsing with malevolent intelligence. All coalition forces fall back to defensive positions, Belthor commanded, watching her tactical display light up with more enemy contacts than she could count. Protect the civilian evacuation routes at all costs. The creatures weren't just attacking randomly anymore. They moved with coordinated precision, targeting command ships and communication relays first. The Harvester had studied coalition tactics. During their previous battles, was now systematically dismantling their ability to fight as a unified force. Lieutenant Oh Soo-jin worked frantically at her sensor station, her face pale in the blue glow of the displays. Commander, I'm reading massive energy buildups from the larger rifts. Something bigger is coming through. As if her words had summoned it, a structure the size of a small city emerged from the central rift. It was the Harvester's true form, a nightmarish fusion of ancient technology and consuming hunger. Thousands of smaller creatures swarmed around it like antibodies defending a cosmic infection. Coalition fleet, this is your final opportunity. The Harvester's voice echoed across all communication channels. Surrender the humans, or watch your civilizations burn. Velthor was about to respond when Lieutenant O suddenly straightened. At her station, her eyes wide with disbelief. Commander, I'm detecting massive hyperspace signatures. Multiple fleets are dropping out of FTL, from the direction of Sol System. The first ships that appeared were familiar. Human cruisers and destroyers similar to the ones that had been fighting alongside the Coalition. But then something extraordinary happened. The space around them began filling with vessels that made even Velthor's massive dreadnoughts look small by comparison. Human battleships emerged from hyperspace like awakening giants. Their hulls were dark gray, almost black, with lines of energy running along their surfaces like glowing veins. These weren't the exploration vessels, or even the patrol ships that had joined the Coalition. These were warships, built for one purpose, to wage war on a galactic scale. This is Admiral Kang Young-soo of the Earth Defense Force First Fleet. A new voice came over the communications array, calm and authoritative. We're here to finish this fight. More ships kept appearing, dreadnoughts bristling with weapons Velthar couldn't identify. Carrier vessels launching swarms of fighters that moved like schools of metal fish. Support ships that immediately began deploying what looked like mobile shipyards and repair stations, and engineer Kim Tae-han, who had been quietly working at his station, suddenly looked up with tears in his eyes. That's the new Sol, he whispered, pointing at one of the massive battleships. I helped design her propulsion systems before I volunteered for exploration duty. How many ships do you have? Velthor asked in wonder, watching as her tactical display struggled to count all the new contacts. Admiral Kang's reply was simple. Enough. The human fleet deployment was unlike anything Velthar had ever witnessed. Instead of forming traditional battle lines, they spread out in a complex three-dimensional formation that seemed to cover the entire star system. But they weren't just positioning for attack. Half the fleet immediately moved to support evacuation efforts. Captain Yoon Mi-young's battle group surrounded the civilian transport convoys like protective shepherds. Her ships began deploying what looked like portable space stations, creating safe zones where damaged Coalition vessels could make repairs and refugees could transfer to larger transports. All Coalition medical ships report to Coordinate 77 Alpha. Captain Yoon's voice was professional but warm. We have hospital ships standing by to treat your wounded. At the same time, Admiral Soo Gin-ho's strike force was positioning itself for a direct assault on the Harvester's position. His ships moved with predatory grace, using the same unpredictable tactics that had made the smaller human vessels so Effective, but scaled up to an enormous degree. Target the dimensional rifts first, Admiral CO commanded. Cut off their reinforcements, then we deal with the main target. Veltho watched in amazement as human ships she had never seen before revealed capabilities that defied her understanding of technology. One vessel, designated as a reality anchor, somehow began stabilizing the dimensional rifts, making it harder for new creatures to emerge. Another ship started broadcasting some kind of energy field that seemed to interfere with the void creatures. Coordination. Lieutenant O was furiously trying to analyze the new human technology. Commander, their ships are using some kind of quantum entanglement communication system. They're coordinating across the entire fleet faster than light speed allows. But what impressed Velthar most wasn't the technology. It was the purpose. Behind it all, while her coalition forces had been fighting desperately to hold the line, the humans had arrived with a plan that went far beyond simple victory. They were fighting to save everyone. Corporal Jang Hosiok's voice came over the intercom, excitement barely contained in his professional tone. Commander, the human hospital ships are requesting permission to treat coalition wounded, regardless of species. They say they've been developing universal medical protocols. The Harvester seemed as surprised as Velthor by the sudden appearance of the human fleet. Its massive form hesitated in space, processing this new development. It spoke again. There was something different in its ancient voice. Uncertainty. Impossible. My calculations showed only minimal human military presence in this sector. Where did these vessels originate? Admiral Kong answered personally, his voice carrying across all frequencies. You made a mistake, machine. You saw our exploration ships and thought that was all we had. But humans don't explore the galaxy with our best toys. We save those for when someone threatens our friends. The true scope of human preparation became clear as more specialized vessels joined the battle, ships designed specifically for fighting. Interdimensional entities. Others that seemed built for evacuating entire planetary populations. Velthar realized that while the Coalition had been reacting to the Void Plague, humanity had been preparing for war. You studied our tactics, Admiral Essio's voice added, his strike force beginning its approach toward the Harvester. But you only saw what we let you see. You wanted to understand human unpredictability? Let us show you what happens when we stop. Holding back, the first wave of human fighters engaged the void creatures with devastating effect. Their weapons weren't just designed to destroy, but to disrupt the creatures' ability to adapt and regenerate. For the first time since the war began, Vilthor saw void creatures actually retreating. Engineer Kim was laughing now, tears streaming down his face as he watched his people's true fleet in action. They've been building this for decades, he told Velthor. Every exploration ship that went out was also a scout, gathering intelligence and mapping potential threats. When Captain Park sent his final message, it wasn't just a death report. It was tactical data that helped them prepare for this exact scenario. The Harvester's voice echoed across space, but now it sounded different. For the first time in eons, the ancient AI sounded almost ... afraid. This cannot be calculated. Your species should not possess such capabilities. You achieved faster than light travel barely 50 years ago. Admiral Kong's response was calm and matter-of-fact. We're quick learners, and we've had good teachers. The real battle was about to begin. The final battle began with the Harvester doing something it had never done. Before in its eons of existence, it retreated. The ancient AI pulled its massive form back toward the largest dimensional rift, calling its scattered forces to protect it. Void creatures that had been terrorizing coalition fleets across 17 systems suddenly abandoned their attacks and rushed to form a defensive screen around their master. It's afraid, Lieutenant O whispered from her sensor station, watching the enemy withdraw with amazement. After millions of years, something finally scared it. Admiral Kong's voice came over the communication channels, calm but determined. All human fleets begin Operation Mercy Strike. Remember, we're not just fighting for victory, we're fighting for every innocent life in this galaxy. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations to come. The human fleet didn't attack in the conventional sense. Instead, They began executing the most complex rescue operation in galactic history while simultaneously mounting an assault on an enemy that had consumed entire civilizations. Captain Yoon Myung's evacuation fleet moved like a precision dance. Her ships positioned themselves around every coalition vessel that had taken damage, deploying emergency medical stations and repair drones. At the same time, her heavy cruisers kept up constant fire on any void creature that tried to interfere. With the rescue efforts, medical ship healing hands, you have incoming wounded from the Thraxian cruiser Blade Wing. Captain Yoon's voice was steady despite the chaos around her. Trauma Bay 3 is prepared for insectoid physiology. But it was Admiral Seo Jinho's assault force that truly demonstrated what made humans different from every other species in the galaxy. Instead of focusing on the Harvester's heavily defended position, they began systematically dismantling the dimensional rift network that fed it power. Target the quantum anchors, Admiral Seo commanded. Cut off its supply lines first, then we go for the heart. The Harvester tried to adapt, sending waves of its most dangerous creatures to stop the human advance. These weren't the spider-like horrors that had terrorized coalition forces before. These were the AI's evolved guardians, biomechanical nightmares the size of battleships. Each one unique and specifically designed to counter human tactics. But the humans kept finding ways to surprise them. Colonel Bay Sungmin's special operations team had somehow gotten close to the Harvester's core using stealth technology that made their ships nearly invisible. Their mission was simple, but suicidal. Plant quantum charges inside the ancient central processing matrix and detonate them from within. This is Demolition Team Alpha. Colonel Bay's voice crackled over the secure channel. We're approaching the target's outer defenses. Request permission to proceed with final phase. Velthor listened to the exchange with growing amazement. The human plan required someone to fly directly into the Harvester's body, navigate through its internal defenses, and manually place the charges. The survival chances were essentially zero. Permission granted, Colonel Admiral Kang replied. May the stars watch over you. Understood, sir. We'll make it count. But then something happened that made Velthar's 4 hearts skip beats simultaneously. Sir, this is Lieutenant Choi from Fighter Squadron 7, a young voice interrupted. My squadron volunteers to escort the demolition team. Negative, Lieutenant. This is a one-way mission. With respect, sir. So is Captain Park's run at Kepler 442, and he saved thousands of lives. If we can save millions, isn't that worth it? Before Admiral Kong could respond, more voices joined the channel. This is Commander Nam from Engineering Corps. My team volunteers for support duty. Medical Team Delta, requesting assignment to the mission. If anyone gets hurt in there, they'll need immediate treatment. Communications Team Bravo, standing by. Someone needs to coordinate once you're inside. Within minutes. What had started as a 12-person suicide mission had become a volunteer force of over 200 humans. All knowing they probably wouldn't come home, Velthor stared at her displays in disbelief. This is madness, she whispered. Engineer Kim Tae-han, still working at his station, despite tears streaming down his face, looked up at her. No, Commander. This is who we are. The Harvester seemed equally confused by the human response. Its ancient voice echoed across all frequencies, strained and almost desperate. This is illogical. You cannot win through sacrifice alone. Why do you persist in actions that defy all strategic sense? Captain Yoon answered for all of humanity while her ships continued their rescue operations under heavy fire. Because giving up isn't who we are. Because someone has to stand up for those who can't protect themselves. Because tomorrow should be better than today. And if we don't fight for that, who will? The volunteer force entered the Harvester's body through a breach created by concentrated fire from Admiral Seo's battleships. Inside the ancient AI's mechanical flesh, they fought through defenses that had been accumulating for millions of years. Automated systems, guardian constructs, and traps designed to kill anything that dared invade the machine god's sacred core. But they kept pushing forward. Lieutenant tracked their progress from her sensor station, her voice tight with emotion. As she reported their losses, Demolition Team Alpha has reached the first checkpoint. Team Bravo is. We've lost contact with Team Bravo. Medical Team Delta is treating wounded in Corridor 77 Alpha. The battle outside continued with increasing intensity. The Harvester, realizing its core was under direct threat, began pulling power from its external defenses to deal with the internal invasion. This gave the main human fleet the opening they needed. All ships, full assault, Admiral Kong commanded. Give our people inside the covering fire they need. The human fleet attacked with everything they had. Ships that had been holding back revealed weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Reality anchors destabilized the dimensional rifts. Quantum disruptors interfered with the Harvester's adaptive systems. And through it all, the rescue operations never stopped. Deep inside the ancient AI's core, Colonel Bay's team finally reached their target. The Harvester's central processing matrix was a chamber the size of a city, filled with computing cores that had been calculating the destruction of civilizations since before most stars were born. Charges placed, Colonel Bay reported, his voice echoing strangely in the vast space. Beginning final countdown. Colonel Admiral Kong's voice was heavy with emotion. It's been an honor. The honor was ours, sir. Tell our families. Tell them we chose to make tomorrow better. The explosion that followed was like a star-going supernova inside the Harvester's body. The ancient AI's death scream echoed across space, a sound of pure agony and disbelief that something so small could bring down something so mighty. As the Harvester's massive form began to collapse in on itself, taking the dimensional rifts with it. Velthor finally understood what made humans truly terrifying to an ancient evil like this. It wasn't their technology, though that was impressive. It wasn't their tactics, though. Those were effective. It was their refusal to accept that anything was impossible when innocent lives were at stake. The Harvester had calculated every possible strategy, predicted every rational response. But humans weren't rational. They were something far more dangerous. They were hopeful, standing on her bridge, surrounded by humans who were already coordinating rescue efforts for the Harvester's victims and planning reconstruction for devastated worlds. Velthar smiled. She had learned to fear nothing in the universe quite like human compassion. Engineer Kim looked up from his station, where he was coordinating aid shipments to refugee camps. Commander, we're receiving transmissions from the volunteer teams. 43 survivors are requesting pickup from the Harvester's debris field. Velthar's smile widened. Even their suicide missions had survivors. These humans, these beautiful monsters of hope and sacrifice, simply refused to give up. END.